Okay, so I think now it is fine. In the last session, what we discussed here we discuss about the configuration class here. From configuration class, what we did, we call the one of the important method called configure. Why we are calling it here? We are trying to provide the configuration information. So these are the configuration. It will try to connect it to the data source, the database related information. And we created the session factory. We created the session, and we come up with the transaction, and we created the one record into this particular database. Now, if I'm going to run this particular, how many records we are having here? Around 8 record we inserted into this message table. Okay, so today we try to discuss the basic classes information first. What are the basic classes we are having here, and what exactly the classes are going to do now? What exactly the classes? Okay, so give me 1 second. Okay, so now is it fine? Internet is stable now. Okay, now so what I'm trying to explain here, now if you observe carefully, here we are having most of these are the basic interfaces and the classes we are having here. Now if you see here, one of the important class called configuration. So what exactly the configuration is doing now? What exactly the configuration is doing? So before going to understand about this particular configuration, we need to understand the architecture about this particular Hibernate. So what is exactly the architecture it is going to provide here? Now here, whatever the particular programming interfaces we are using here, now what exactly it will do here? It will try to communicate it will try to use the persistent layer of this particular application into the database here, into the database here. So this is what we need to understand. So what are the architecture related classes and interfaces we are using? So those using the classes and interfaces we are going to convert into the database classes. So whenever we are trying to converting, we'll create a persistent classes here. Those persistent classes are it will converted into the database classes here. Okay, and here the main important class here we are going to provide the configuration class here. Along with this particular configuration class, we are having interfaces. What are the interfaces we are having? Okay. Now here, what we need to understand here, this interfaces also, it is going to play very important role. What are the interfaces we are having? The first one is session factory, second one is session, and third one is transaction. So these are the three interfaces are going to be play very important role whenever we are trying to work with the Hibernate applications here. Okay. Along with this particular interfaces, we are having some other callback interfaces. What are the callback interfaces we are having? Something like interceptor, lifecycle, and validate related in callback interfaces we are having. We'll discuss those particular interfaces later, but currently whatever we are using, these are the core interfaces and core classes we need to discuss here. So normally, what exactly the particular Hibernate architecture it is going to be look like here. To understand this, basically what we will do, here we are going to have a business layer. Here we are going to have a business layer. This is we can consider as a business layer. And from this particular business layer, what are the different the classes and interfaces we are having it? Here within this particular business layer, what we will do, we'll define the life cycle related methods here. Okay, life cycle related methods. And the second one will do the validation related part here. We'll do the validating the respective fields or respective object related information. And after that, we'll try to create the persistent layer. Okay, so this is, we can call it as a persistent layer. Now, what we are going to have under this particular persistent layer, we'll have a session interface, and we are going to work with the transaction, and we'll try to work with the query. So this particular query related information will create a object and we'll try to communicate with the databases here. And here, along with this, so we are going to have session factory. We are going to have session factory and configuration class. So these are the classes and interface we'll try to create under the persistent layer. But in the business layer, what we are doing is using this particular Hibernate related the classes lifecycle classes as well as validate related classes. What we will do, we'll try to validate the respective fields like the POSIX related fields and model classes, so that successfully we can update the data into the respective databases here. Okay, so session factory, and here we are going to be using configuration here. Configuration. So these are the basic information we need to understand when we are trying to work with this particular Hibernate architecture. So here the architecture, it is divided into the two layers. The first one is business layer. Second one is persistent layer here. Second one is persistent layer. So this is what we need to understand here. Now here, what exactly the layers whatever the layer we are discussing here, what exactly the layers are going to do? Using the business layer, we'll try to update the fields, like we'll try to validate the fields, and using the persistent layer, we are going to connect it to the database object, so that whatever the business layer objects we are having, we are going to save into the database. And here we'll use a different type of databases, like we can work with the JDBC, we can work with the respective related Hibernate, and other steps also it is going to be integrated here. Like using the Hibernate API, we are going to connect it to the databases here. So these are the architecture we need to understand. And within this particular architecture, we are having 4 core interfaces. What are the core interfaces we are having? The first one is session. First one is session. And here the core interfaces we are going to be used in the each and every Hibernate application. Okay. So basically here, what we need to understand here, whenever we are trying to work with any Hibernate application, what we will do, this core 5 interfaces, like the interfaces and classes are going to be play very important role here. Very important role here. Now another important section, what we need to understand here. So one of the important interface called session. Now what exactly the session interface will do? The session interface basically, it will try to connect it to the data source. It will try to connect it to the database to insert and modify or delete. Like it's like a COD operation. So if I want to update all the fields, or if I want to delete the field, so this particular session we are going to be using. So we can say, like we can store and retrieve the persistent object, and we are going to control the transaction. Getting the point? This is very important here. Now, what we are doing here, using this particular session interface, we are going to retrieve and we are going to store the data and we are going to control the particular transaction here. And here, the session interface is one of the primary interface. So it is going to be used by our Hibernate applications here. And here, the session is a lightweight object. Lightweight means, so it is not going to take much time to create an object here, and it is not going to have any dependency. Okay. So simply we can create an object and we can destroy the respective object whenever it is required here. Whenever it is required here. So this is what we need to understand here. Okay. And here, so whatever we are saying, so session interface is one of the primary interface in our Hibernate application, and the session is a lightweighted interface here, so that we can create n number of session objects and we can destroy the n number of session objects. Getting the point? And here, so once the session is created, what we are doing is we are going to create a transaction object. From the transaction object, we are going to control the respect to the data which is going to save into the database here. Getting the point? This is very important. And here, the session something like it is the session is something between the connection and the transaction, because so once a connection is performed, what we are doing is the session will try to connect the database and it will update. And again, once the data is updated, if we want to store into the permanent, what we will do, we'll commit the data or we'll roll back the data. So because of this, we'll call it as a session is a something between the connection and the transaction. Okay. And here another important part here, session is not a thread safe. So we need to work with only one thread here. We need to work with only one thread here. So whenever we are trying to work with the multiple threads here, so we need to create a multiple session objects here. So this is what we need to understand regarding this particular session interface. So session will play very important role when we are working with Hibernate applications here. Okay. So is it clear? Any questions regarding the session? Okay. See, basically, so what we need to understand regarding this particular session, session is one of the primary interface which is going to be used in our Hibernate application. And here, session is a lightweighted object so that we can create a n number of session object and we can destroy the n number of session objects here. And here, so once the session is created, what we will do, we'll connect it to the database and we'll do the different type of operations like CORD operations. We'll create the data, we'll update the data, we'll read the data, and we'll delete the data. So these are the CORD operations we can do with the help of this particular session. So thread safe means when we are trying to work with the multiple threads, session, it is not going to share the same data with the multiple threads here. Let's say here we are having around 10 threads here, around 10 threads. So 10 threads means 10 requests we received from the user. 10 threads means what we will do, we are going to get the 10 requests here. Whenever we are getting the 10 requests, now what we will do, so the 10 requests basically 2 requests they are going to update and the remaining 8 requests they are trying to delete the data. So whenever we are trying to perform with the multiple threads, what happens here, we are not going to get the consistent data. The 2 threads are not going to successfully, it will update the data. The remaining 8 threads are not going to be delete the data from the database here. So here, what happens basically, so we may get the different result because sometimes here, instead of updating the 2 threads, it may updated by the 4 threads. It may not updated by the 1 thread. So this is the drawback we are going to have whenever we are trying to work with multiple threads here. So because of this, we'll call it as a session is not a thread safe. Every time we need to create a 1 thread at a time. So one request is completed, then only second request will come and it will process the request here. At a time, we cannot create a multiple threads. If you remember, in the core Java, we discussed about the multiple threads, multi-threading concepts here. We created around 5 threads. At a time, the 5 threads are going to be processed data. It is not going to be dependent to the any other threads here. Whenever it is time to depend it to the another threads, what happens here? Once one thread is completed, second one will come into the picture and it will process the second thread here. So it's like a sequence order it is going to be processed. When we are trying to work with the session, all the threads, it should be processed as a sequence here. It cannot process as a parallel here. So this is means the thread shape here. Okay. Now we'll go to the another important section called session factory. We'll go to the session factory. So the session factory, what exactly it will do now? Whatever this particular session factory, from the session factory, what we are doing, we are getting the session object. Okay, and here the session factory is a lightweighted. Okay, session factory is a lightweighted. Session is a lightweighted. Session factory, it is not a lightweighted. So if we want to create a session factory, what happens basically? We need a basic information like compared to the session. So the session factory, it is going to expect the more information. So because of that, session factory, it is not a lightweighted here. And here, so session factory, what exactly it is going to do now? Session factory basically, it will try to work with the multiple threads so that the session factory, it will allow multiple thread environments here. From the session factory, we'll create a session object here. And here, what we are going to do here, when we are trying to create a multiple database here, let's say we are having e-commerce application here, and the current e-commerce application, it is going to store the data into the 3 into databases. One is the Oracle, second one is the MySQL, third one is a Postgres. So what happens here? So here we are having 3 different databases here. Whenever we are having 3 different databases here, we need to create a 3 different session factory object here. For each database here, we'll create a one session factory. Why we are going to create a one session factory? Because with respect to the session factory, what happens basically? One object, okay, the one session factory object will contain the respective database information. Because of this, how many databases we are going to create here? So we are going to create the same data source like a session factory objects here. Okay, so this is what we need to understand. For each database, we'll create a one session factory, and each session factory we are going to create a one session. And here, session factory, it will work with the multiple threads, but session, it is not going to work with the session multiple threads here. Okay, and here we can work with another important section called what we can do. So we can make the caching behavior. So using the session factory, we can make the caching so that instead of every time it is connecting to the data source, what we will do, so within this particular cache, whatever the result we are going to get here, the same result it is going to be written. Basically, cache, what it will do, first it will connect to the data source, like it will connect it to the database based on the respective conditions here. Now it will load the data from the database and it will keep one copy into the cache. One copy it is going to keep into the cache, and from the second request onwards, the same fields if we provide, like the same condition if we are going to provide to fetch the data, what happens basically? Instead of connecting to the database, first it will check in the cache. If the data is available in the cache with respect to the particular condition, it will load from the cache. It is not going to connect it to the database. So this is the main behavior we are going to get from the cache, and the cache, it is available for this particular session factory. Okay, so this is about the session factory. Now we understand the session and the session factory. What exactly the session is going to do here? Session basically it is a lightweighted. We are going to create n number of session object, and using the session we are going to perform the various CAD operations here. And here the session something, it is the between to the connection as well as the transaction. But session factory, it is a important to the factory object here. For each database, we are going to create a session factory, and the session factory we are going to work with the multiple threads at a time here, because here session factory only one object we are going to create here. The same object we can share into the multiple threads here. But at the session level, we are not going to create a one object. We are going to create a n number of objects here. For each request, we are going to work with a separate session object here. So this is what we need to understand. Okay, this is what we need to understand here. Session and session factory here. Okay, so is it clear? Still any questions regarding the session and session factory? Okay, so now another important section, another important piece of code here, what we used here, configuration. So basically, whatever this particular configuration we are using, now if you observe, it is a class here. It is a class here because we are trying to create a object of this particular configuration. For this particular interfaces, as we know, we are not going to create a object, but we'll create a object for this particular classes here. Okay, so now what exactly the configuration class will do now? The configuration object, it is going to be configured and boost up the entire Hibernate here. Okay, the particular application, it is going to use the configuration instance here. So and the configuration instance, and it is going to specify the location of this mapping dog as well as Hibernate specific properties. Getting the point. Now, what we are understanding is using this particular configuration, we are going to configure and we'll try to start up the Hibernate application. And while starting, we are going to share the mapping related information as well as the Hibernate specific related information here. Hibernate, the specific property related information. So that while creating the connection between the Hibernate and the respective the particular respective persistent or whatever the business layer of classes we are going to be using, and it will do the mediator of this particular database as well as our Java application here. Okay, so what we will do here, what exactly the configuration is doing now? The configuration, it will configure and boost up our Hibernate application. While starting the Hibernate application, we are going to store the respective mapping information, so that how many the particular persistent classes we are having, those classes are going to convert it into the database tables here. With respect to the mapping file, it will convert it into the Hibernate table here. And another important section, what happens here, it will try to connect it to it will provide the session factory object information once the configuration object successfully created here. Okay, so this is what we need to understand regarding this particular configuration interface here. And another one is transaction interface. Okay, another one is transaction. So what exactly the transaction interface will do now? What exactly the transaction interface will do? So transaction interface, basically it is one of the important API. Hibernate application, it is going to be used. Hibernate application, it is going to be used. And here, what exactly the transaction interface will do now? Now here, the transaction interface, it is going to manage the transaction, their own infrastructure code, because the Hibernate is implemented their own infrastructure code to manage the particular transactions here. Getting the point? And the particular transaction, what we can understand here, the particular transaction means like the Hibernate, it is going to have the JTA related transaction, Cobra related transaction. We are going to have different type of transaction. But what exactly the transaction will do now? The transaction, it will do the save the data into the database permanently, or whenever we are going to get any exception, it will roll back the data into the database. So for this purpose, what we are doing here, we are going to use this particular transaction here. Okay, we'll discuss more about this particular transaction in the upcoming classes, because we are having different type of properties. So we need to discuss those information, what exactly the transaction interface will do. Okay, so far we discussed about this session factory, configuration class, and transaction. And another two important information also we need to discuss here. The first one is query, and the second one is criteria. Okay, the query interface, it is going to perform the queries against the database. So instead of writing the normal SQL queries, okay, instead of writing the normal SQL queries, what we can do, using this particular query interface, we can write the Hibernate related queries. Getting the point? Hibernate related queries. And in, along with this particular writing the Hibernate related queries, and it will do it will control the query execution also. It will control the query execution also. This is very important. We need to understand regarding this particular query interface. Now, what exactly it is doing here? So using the query interface, now we are going to perform the various operation into this particular database. Okay, and here when we are trying to work with the query, here we are not going to use the normal SQL related queries here. So we'll work with the Hibernate related queries. Hibernate related queries here. And after that, it will try to manage the control of this particular execution. Control of this particular execution, which is going to managed by this particular query object here. And here, the query instance, it is going to be used by the two parameters. Okay, it is going to be used the number of query parameters here. And along with that, we are going to provide the number of result, like limit the result, how many results we want to get it. So we are going to have a different type of condition, and we'll execute the respective query. So we'll see the query related information in the upcoming classes, but just understand here, using the query object, we can connect it to the database and we can perform the various operation. And the query object, it is going to load as a Hibernate related queries, and we can control the execution of this particular query object. Okay, and the object, it is going to have a different type of query parameters. So using the different type of query parameter, we can limit the result here. Getting the point? We can limit the number of result, and we can execute the final query object here. Okay, and at the same way, we are going to have criteria interface. So it is similar to the query here. It is similar to the query here, and we are going to create a criteria object, and we'll provide the respective condition. Based on the respective condition, we'll load the particular object here. Okay, so we'll see the differences between query and criteria, what exactly it will do, and how exactly this query and criteria it is going to be work under the Hibernate applications here. Okay, and here how we are going to create a query object here. The query, again, it is a lightweighted. Again, query is a lightweighted, and we cannot be used outside of this particular session. So this is very important here. The query object, when we want to use the query object, we should use within this particular session only. We cannot use the query outside of this particular session object here, because the query interface, we are going to get the instance of this particular query object here with respect to the session interface here. With the help of this particular session interface, we are going to get the query object. So let's see here. I will show you how we are going to get this particular query here. So session dot. Here you can see what we are doing here. We are calling the method called create query. the create query method, what is doing it? It is trying to return the query object. It is trying to return this particular query object. So this is the way we'll get the query objective. And at the same time, we'll get the criteria also. We'll get the criteria. Okay. Now here you can see create criteria. Using this particular create criteria, what we are doing here, we are getting the criteria object here. Now here you can see criteria. So we'll see the differences between query and the criteria. So how exactly it is going to be used. Okay. So these are the basic interfaces we are going to be used under our Hibernate application. The first one is session factory, configuration, transaction, query and criteria we discussed so far here. And along with this, we are going to have a callback interfaces. We are going to have callback related interfaces. So what are the different type of callback related interfaces we are having? Now we need to understand here. Okay, the callback interfaces basically it is going to allow the application to receive a notification when something it is going to be happen. Getting the point. So let's say once the data is inserted into the database, so we need some notification. Once the data is updated, once the data is deleted, when we want to get the notification, what we will do, we'll call the callback related interfaces here. The callback related interface will play a very important role. When something is done, we need to get the notification. Okay, here we are having life cycle and validatable. These two interfaces, it is going to play as the callback related interfaces here. Okay, the lifecycle and validatable will provide the information when the something is going to be happen at the Hibernate level. Okay, so we'll see what exactly these two interfaces are going to be provided, and along with this, we are going to have interceptor. Okay, we are going to have interceptor. This particular interceptor also, it is going to provide the notification related information whenever we are going to modify something about the persistent classes here. Okay, this same interceptor we are going to be used in the Spring application when something it is going to be happen. Like so before saving the data into the database, we want to perform some operation. We are going to call the interceptor, and at the same time, after completion of the data, like after data is inserted, after data is processed, if we want to get some notification, so again we'll use the interceptor concept here. So we are going to have different type of interceptor. We'll see the what exactly the each and every interceptor it will do and how we can implement into the Hibernate applications here. Okay, so this is what we need to understand here. And along with this particular callback interfaces, we are going to have types here. So type means now here if we observe, we are having one of the important model class. What is the model class we are having? Message. And here we have provided the long, and we provided the string, and we provided the object type here. So when we provided these are the information, what happens basically here? What happened basically? Here we are going to have an important section called the particular types, or it needs to convert it into the Hibernate, the database data types here. Okay, so how it is going to be converted here? Again, we are going to have a type interfaces here. The type interfaces are going to take care of converting the particular data type into the respective database column types here. Okay, so these are the basic information we are having here. So we'll see here, we'll see the particular types concept called, one is a type interface, second one is composite user type interface we are having. So these are the different type of types we are having. We'll see in one example how we can convert this particular using the types related interfaces here. Okay, so still any questions so far? Any interface related information you need to be explained one more time? Okay, now if you don't have anything, so these are the basic core interfaces we are going to be used in our Hibernate applications here. And along with this particular core interfaces, we are having extension interfaces. The extension interface is also very important here. Let's say if you remember when we are trying to work with the JDBC related stuff here, what we did, we created the one dialect here. We created the one dialect. So what exactly the dialect will do now? What exactly the dialect will do? Dialect basically it will provide the database related queries. The database related specific queries, it is going to be provided by this particular interface called dialect here. Okay, so this is what we need to understand regarding this particular dialect. So we'll see what exactly the dialect will do and how we can override the dialect related concept here. When we want to override here, we need to implement the dialect concept and we need to provide the important example here. Okay, and another one is a generator. Generator means, let's say in the current example, whenever I'm trying to save here, what happening basically, the ID automatically it is generating. The ID automatically it is generating. I'm not providing ID value explicitly. Get it? I'm not providing the ID value explicitly. Even though if I'm not providing how the ID value is generating, here we are having the identifier generator related information. So if you observe in the Java code, we did not added anything, but what we did here in the mapping file, what we provided here we provided the generator. Okay, so we'll see the different type of generator we are having. So using this particular generator, the ID it is going to be generated automatically, or if you want to provide manually, you can provide manually also. So the generator we are going to have, the generator will play as a providing the ID related values, so automatic ID related values here. Okay, so we discuss about the identity generator, dialect related generator, and we have a caching related. Okay, so we are having different type of caches, like mostly Hibernate it is going to be used EH cache. We'll see one example on the EH cache, what exactly it will do. And another one is transaction factory. The transaction factory, transaction, and transaction manager. These are the three important concepts will play very important role on the transaction management. Okay, because the transaction management is very important, because once we perform the operation, the data it should be saved into the database. What we will do, we'll work with the transaction management only. If the transaction management which is not going to support the data properly, what happens internally, the data it is not going to be saved successfully into the database, so we may lose the business also. Because of that, the transaction management which is going to be play very important role in our Hibernate here. Okay, so these are the interfaces are going to be used in our Hibernate applications here. These are the basic information we are going to be used in our Hibernate application here. Okay, and what we did here, we are providing the configuration file, and where we provided the particular resource here, the mapping file. The mapping file we provided under this particular Hibernate configuration. But here we are having a method call. We can provide the resource. So this method, what exactly the method will do now? This particular method, it will try to load the resource, like mapping file resource related information here. So where we are having this particular message.hbm.xml here, we are having under this particular resource folder. So let's say now what I will do here, I'm going to comment out under the configuration. If you remember in the previous, we are providing the map, we are providing the respective mapping here, and we can comment out this, and let me update what we are doing, add resource. So add resource method. Okay, and here, so we'll keep as it is as a file, and I'm going to save this particular record. Now what I'm doing is, I'm calling the add resource method. Add resource method basically what is doing it, when we want to add the mapping file, we can call the add resource and we can update into we can provide the respective mapping file here, because add resource method which is expecting is the parameter, and we can provide the particular mapping file name here. So when we are having multiple here, so what we will do, when we are having multiple files here, so we are going to call different type of the particular map add resource method. Otherwise, what we can do, we are going to have the important another method called add class. So directly we can call the add class and we can update the particular mapping file information. So now if you see here, now here see, we generated these are the select query and insert query. Whenever we are calling the add resource, we provided the message.hbm.xml file, and we'll see the newly created record is inserted into this particular database or not here. Now you can see, so 9 record and add resource method we are calling here. Okay, add resource method we are calling, and the next message ID also we provided this one here. Okay, so what exactly add resource will do now, when we are having a mapping related information, so if you want to provide, we can provide by calling this particular add resource. So another important section what we are doing here we are going to have configuration dot add class. Okay, so this particular class also we can provide here, but currently what is the class we are having? Message. Currently we are having this particular message class here. Getting the point? Now I'm commenting out this particular configuration dot add resource here. The same example I'm running. But if you observe carefully, what is the exception we are going to get here? Exception we are going to get here. Now here you can see. Mm, okay, so let me do the build first. Where we are having the Spring Boot test here. Okay, delete this particular test here. Okay, now so it is successful. Okay, so what is the error we are getting? So I'm expecting error here. So we need to see the error. Okay, what is saying here? Hmm, Okay. Let me comment our add class also. So we are expecting to see the exception. Now we'll get the mapping related exception because so both I commented here. Okay. Unable to locate the persistent. So this is we expected. The mapping file we expected because here what we are doing here, the add resource as well as add class we commented here. But here using this particular add class also we can provide the information. But currently we are not working with the annotation example. Currently we are not working with the annotation example. So we are going to use the XML configuration. To use this particular XML configuration, now what we are doing here we are going to provide the here we are going to provide the mapping document here. Okay, so let's see this particular add class com dot example dot spring hibernate dot message here. Spring hibernate dot message. Now whenever I'm providing this particular message, the add class method, it is going to assume the name of the mapping file, which is going to end with a hvm.xml extension. And it is going to be deployed along with the mapping file here. Let's see. So this will run or it is going to be get any exception. No. We are expecting to see the errors here. Okay. So okay, still we are not getting the okay. Yeah, here is saying org hibernate boot mapping not found exception mapping reset. So what we are getting here is not from con dot example hibernate dot message dot hbm xml. Okay. So if you see here it is available mapping dot hbm dot xml file where we are having the mapping is which is available under the resource here under the resource. So let me copy and paste it here. Okay. Now I'm going to run the same example. Okay, run with the scan. So we'll get the proper exception information, why it is failing. Mm, And it says CG com dot example spring hibernate message dot hbm dot xml. But okay. So we are having the name of the file and class and we are having same MESSG. Okay. So both we are having same, but still it is not able to find out this particular class. Any not going to use this particular add class here. So if you want to resource, otherwise annotation related example. We'll see the annotation related example, how this particular the classes were going to be used here. Okay, and another important section also we can do here, we can provide the hibernate.property file. Currently whatever we are doing, hibernate.cfg.xml. So this is the one approach. This is the one approach we are providing, Hibernate configuration. The second approach here, Hibernate.properties file. Hibernate.properties file. So whenever we are providing this particular same properties information, the same property information under the Hibernate.property file. So Hibernate which will load by default with the help of this particular cfg.xml as well as dot properties here. Okay. These are the two different ways we can provide the configuration properties here. The one approach we discuss here, the second approach we'll discuss in the tomorrow session. And once we complete this particular property file, and what is the next step we are going to do here? The next step here, we'll try to provide we discuss about the XML based, and we'll discuss about the property file, and we'll discuss about the logging here. Logging is also very important here. What exactly the logging framework will do within this particular Hibernate, what exactly the logging it is going to do. Like if you want to provide the logger messages before the data is inserted, after the data is inserted, so we are having logging framework. We'll see what are the different type of configuration we need to provide to work with the logging framework. Okay, so these are the two important things we'll discuss in the tomorrow session. So once it is completed, the particular logging framework and Hibernate.properties here, we'll try to come up with another example. We'll create a multiple classes and we'll try to discuss the various example using this particular property file and logging framework here. Okay, so tomorrow also it is important class we'll discuss here. Don't miss this particular session. Okay, anything you want to discuss in the recording today session? Okay. Yeah, from today onwards we are going to have a session. Sure. I will, yeah, we can discuss, we can start the session around 6:30 and we'll try to complete by 7:30.